And they were roommates.
Oh God, they were roommates.
What's up, happy hour heroes? I'm Charlie C, and this is Big Tone, and
What's
we
going on?
top of everything. What's up, T?
What's up? I'm
Well,
ready. I'm ready for this one.
What the hell is going on? I love it.
Busted out the old hat.
I'm trying to think if there's going to be a giant in the top 10. There's a guy that we'll get to it, but there's a guy that played for the Giants that I had in my top 10, and I took him out in the last 24 hours as I did an analysis.
Okay.
But, man, I think in the long run, it might be a little bit of a sore spot for you. We'll see.
All right, we'll see.
But before we go,
I look like Eric Dickerson with the glasses.
Yeah, there you go. That's a little tease.
Will he make the top 10? That's the question.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, before we do start, and we're going to go together, we're going to count down. We'll both give our 10 to 1. Please hit the like button, subscribe. It really helps us a lot. If you really love us, buy us a pint or a coffee, Sláinte. There's a link in the description below to the tip jar, so that would be appreciated. But this week, we are counting down the top 10 running backs of all time, in case you haven't figured it out already. There's a lot to weigh, man. Longevity is part of the equation. Does that matter? Yards per carry. I'm a big yards per carry guy. How much, what would they give you each time they touched the ball? Were they an accumulator or were they a huge impact? Were they a weapon? Where does receiving come into play? Probably the biggest thing for me, we'll see, not with every case, but eye test, man. Like, what did they do? Like, when you looked at them, what did they do to these defenses? How did you, if you're a defensive coordinator, how do you defend this guy?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I went. So before we start, going out, before I start going with my top 10, you're going to kick it off this week, Tony, with your number 10 all-time running back.
All right. Drum roll. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm going to have to take this thing off, man. My head grew over the years. This isn't like legit, but I got to go. Yeah, I think when you talk about any sports figure, there's a lot that you take into account. Obviously stats, but also, did you ever see the guy? And if you saw him on TV, that's one thing. But if you even saw him live, that takes on a whole nother value. So my top, or my number 10, might be a little controversial, especially since I am a New York Giant fan, which that's a whole nother episode, boy. I'm going to go with John Riggins, number 44 with the then Redskins, but started his career as a Jet actually in the 70s, and played 71 to I think 74 or 5 with the Jets, and then went over to the Redskins, and he had that famous runaway run against the Dolphins in the Super Bowl. Oh God, I should have done my homework. What Super Bowl was that? But when they're grabbing his shirt and he's breaking away and he's running down the sidelines, like, first of all, you never really see somebody who's built like a linebacker. I'm sure there's a couple other guys on the list that are built like that, but Pro Hall of Fame class of '92. I actually lived in DC for a while, and he was a myth. He was a legend, and rumor had it that he actually lived in a public storage facility for a while because he was homeless. So, but yeah, so
It's a great pick, man. I love it, man. Riggins. I spent my summers in Virginia growing up, and he was on the Redskins at the time. And my dad was a Redskin fan, and as a Jet fan, which I am, it's another great Jet, a Jet that became great later on. But he was a beast, man. He was beast mode. And I don't know if you remember this, our freshman year. Do you remember used to play that football game before video games like blew up in the years after that? There was that like X's and O's football game that we used to play in the video lab in the Netherlands.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to always be the Redskins, and I would just run Riggins, right? The counter tray.
Yeah, on the end around or whatever, yeah.
The counter tray and the running back screen to Riggins. And I would just you couldn't stop me. That was my whole game plan. Every now and then I let
that game.
But that's a great pick, man. I love it because it's not your typical top 10 guy that you think of, but he was an animal.
Yeah, he was a complete animal on and off the field.
So right. I guess that brings me.
Wait. Do you? We're doing this a little differently. Do you agree or disagree, or? I
think he's a great pick. He's not in my top 10, but he's probably in my top 15. And I love that I think that, eye test, he was one of the most devastating. He just, it's one thing to like outfake. There's something about a guy who just runs people over.
Yeah.
Just fires up the whole team. If you're a coach, let's say if you're drafting the top 10 running backs of all time, it might be different than the top 10 running backs you'd actually take in your team. Riggins is in that team because the mentality that he brings to your team. I am going to beat you down. And by the way, in the fourth quarter, if you got the lead and you got Riggins, it's over.
Yeah, it's over.
He's just the defense he's going to wear you down. So he didn't make my top 10. There's some guys like that in there.
Okay.
But he's a good pick, man. I don't have a problem with it. Some people there might. I don't.
Okay.
I'll say this.
Sounds good.
I have two guys that I left off my top 10 list that I think one of them is complete. He's my Jimi Hendrix of the running backs. People are going to lose their mind. Cowboy fans are going to rip me and hate me. I think he's the number one all-time, running back in terms of yards. Of course, I'm talking about Emmitt Smith. Emmitt Smith, he's a great running back. Don't get me wrong, right? He 3-time Super Bowl champion, 4.2 yards per carry, which would be the lowest on my list, but it's still pretty damn good.
Wow.
But he had that great offensive line. He was a consistent professional. He was a threat out of the backfield, but I left him off my list because a little bit, he reminds me of almost like a Pete Rose or Derek Jeter, great players, but he was an accumulator. He wasn't as devastating of a runner as Riggins, or who I put at 10 or 9, or who I think, but he was great. So there's going to be great guys left off the list. I left him off the list. The other guy that I left off my list that I think I really wanted to put him in my list because I think he's a great running back. Maybe you're going to have him there. I kind of hinted at him already. He was a Giant. He's now an Eagle. Test one of the best running backs I've ever seen. He's got a 4.7 yard per carry average up to this point.
Right.
He's already got over 3,000 yards receiving, which means if he stays on that pace, he might be the number 2 or number 1 all-time receiving running back.
Which is insane. Yeah.
And eye test. He is insane. With Penn State, he was insane. With the Giants, he was insane. I don't know how they let him go. He is a machine. Like his moves, he will run you over. He'll jump backwards over you.
Yeah, that was crazy.
So I had Saquon on my list.
All right, well, let's get to it. What's number 9?
Off. Because when I made the list, I'm like, I can't leave these guys out.
All right, I can't wait. Well, those are two that were definitely in mind. So I'm dying to hear who's going to. And it better not be OJ.
I've got a Chicago Bear.
Of course.
And I only got one Chicago Bear. Gale Sayers is not it. Great running back. I'm leaving him off. 5 yards per carry average, but short in career. At number 10, I have Sweetness, Walter Payton. He had the agility and the moves, but he was also a powerful runner, a Super Bowl champion. He had a 5.5 yard per carry season. His career was 4.4 yards. He had 4,500 receiving yards in an era where the running backs didn't catch the ball as much as they do now. So at number 10, my guy is Walter Payton.
Is that 10 or 9?
That's my number 10.
Oh, so we're going to go 10. Okay.
Emmitt Smith. Yeah, we're going all the way down the list, baby. We're number 10. You've got Riggins. I've got Walter Payton.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. Your top 5 is going to be something to listen to.
We'll see.
I like it. I think Payton is another one. Like, I think, in the 80s, that Chicago, what was that, 85 when they won it? That Chicago Bear team could have beat anybody.
That was the best team I think I've
I mean, yeah.
He wasn't even the Payton that,
right.
That's like the older Payton.
Right, the tail end. Yeah.
But when I first started watching football, he was a guy that just dominated, and he's in that conversation. I mean, Gale Sayers is another great one, but you can't have everybody on your list. So that's the Bears.
The Bears. That's a good one.
So 9. You want me to go 9 now, and then we'll go 2, and then you do?
No, I'll go 9. I'll go 9. I'm going to go the other Dallas guy. 77 to 87. Then I actually think he went to Denver or something. At the end of people's careers is just so brutal sometimes. But I actually was privileged to see him when he played with Pitt, and they played at the Yale Bowl. He ran for like, I don't know, 220 something yards. Crazy. I'm talking about Tony Dorsett, who was one of the. He ran like Gale Sayers and ran like Walter Payton, like like a lot of once he got up to speed, it just seems like he wasn't running people over. He was just running past people. If you think about Riggins versus Dorsett, just 2 completely different running backs, 2 completely different football players. But he was, almost 13,000 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, not shabby. And, made it to the Hall of Fame in 94. So that was another great team, another great, 10 years or so of, the Cowboys being the Cowboys before it got into the 90s and Emmitt Smith took over. But, Tony Dorsett's my number 9.
Good pick, man. Yeah, he's a great one. There's no arguing it. There's no, that's why I brought up the guys that left off more than anything, because there's no arguing these picks really. I'm sure some people take affront to it, and we welcome that and love that, but you can't argue with it. Tony Dorsett was a great one. That was a great Dallas team. I was kind of a Steelers fan as a kid. The Jets sucked. I was going to Jet games, but, back then you used to have it was kind of weird. Like there was a lot of Dallas fans in New York, and there was Bronco fans, there were Raider fans. And that was my team, was the Steel Curtain and Franco Harris, another great running back. But yeah, that Tony Dorsett was a weapon, speedy, fast, and that's a good one, Tony.
Yeah.
My number 9 is kind of was the first real. I put this guy like pure running back wise, he's not in the top 10, right? Like he's a great running back, 4.3 yards per carry. He's the number 1 receiving running back of all time out of the backfield. He was a weapon. He made it impossible for teams to plan against. Super Bowl champion. Every quarterback he played with had a higher passer rating compared to previous years. A safety valve for Kurt Warner. He was a great running back too, by the way. 136 touchdowns, 19,000 total yards. Marshall Faulk,
the
first true backfield weapon.
Yeah.
Changed football in some ways. And he's my pick at number 9, Marshall Faulk.
That's a good one. That's a sneaky one. The fact that he's going to be on the list ahead of Emmitt. That's
Listen, if I'm picking a team, if I'm drafting a team and I have a choice between Faulk and Emmitt, very similar, but I'm taking Faulk and Emmitt, and you put Faulk behind that line, and that no, Emmitt was great, man. He was great. I'm not saying he wasn't.
No, of course not.
But Faulk at 9, man,
that was that was a great team. I mean, those you watch these teams that are just like beating the hell out of people and just ramming it down their throat. He reminds me so much of LaDainian Tomlinson, but with LT, I don't think LT had the core of the Chargers were just mediocre. I mean, he was great. He was the standout. But with Faulk, he was the linchpin of the backfield. Like you said, he basically was the beginning of that, that dual threat, being able to catch the ball out of the backfield and take off running. Kurt Warner was out of his mind in those years.
Yeah, Warner was great, and he had some weapons, but that team's not as great as it was without Faulk. He really, he was the safety outlet. And by the way, nice safety outlet, because you dump it off to him, next thing you know, he's scampering for 20 yards. So
right, yeah,
he pulled a lot of games out of the hat for those guys.
Right.
I just think I had to have him in there.
I like that. I like that one. That's a sneaky one. I don't know if I would have guessed that. That's my Jeff Healy. That's your Jeff Healy.
Yes. I don't know about that, but yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah.
All right. You got it. You're up to number 8.
Number 8, and I'm realizing that I like the beasts. I think we'll probably put up the video, the famous video of this guy when his shirt's getting ripped off running down the field. And the Houston Oilers were really nothing without Earl Campbell. Number 7, again, another guy, almost 10,000 yards, 4.3 per carry, 74 TDs, 10,000 yards from scrimmage, Pro Football Hall of Fame 91. But I mean, you talk about, this is a Riggins type of guy, right? This is when running backs were you were either a Walter Payton or a Faulk or a LT or what have you, or you were just a linebacker in a running back's position. And Earl Campbell, every time he touched the ball, man, he was the fact that he could get up to that speed as a big guy like that and just run people over. I'm sure at some point we'll have the best top tight ends in one of our episodes. Pavaro's going to be right up there, right? Just running people over. So I'm a little biased. I never saw Earl Campbell live. I mean, like at a game, but I obviously saw him on TV. And, it's one of those guys, like when I was going through the list, I'm like, immediately I was like, I got to add him. And it wasn't like stellar numbers, and the team sucked, right? Other than Buddy Ryan getting in fist fights with people and on the sidelines. But Earl Campbell's my number.
Yeah, I mean, Campbell he's a beast. He's one of my favorite running backs of all time. He was an animal. We're going to be showing some video here. I'm sure he could run around you, run away from you, but he would just run you over.
Yeah.
And like you said, ripping shirts out, and he's an all-time great. And it's these running backs now with the dual threats as receivers and all that. It's all great. But if you're drafting a team from scratch, man, that's a guy I want on my team. And
right.
I say, like, if he played, if he played a little longer, at his best, there was nothing better than watching him just destroy. Like, stop me. I
Right.
dare you. Who was the quarterback?
It was before Pete, right?
Yeah,
Rodney Pete.
before quarterback. Damn. But he was good. But he wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't. The teams were lining up to stop Earl Campbell.
Yeah.
And putting 8 men in the box, putting 11 men in the box if they could, and there was no stopping him.
No, there's no stopping him. And like you said, I mean, there's hundreds of guys really that you could put in the top 10, but this is more, I don't know, maybe I'm being a little controversial picking him, but I think that, when you're thinking about a guy with guts, he's playing hurt. Every time these days when you're playing fantasy or whatever, you're like, you got to wait till friggin' Sunday morning to see if the toe sprain that your running back has is going to sideline him so you could start him or not. Earl Campbell was playing. He was playing. Doesn't matter. And that's like John Riggins. I don't even think John Riggins washed his uniform, or I mean, he was just that type of guy, So yeah, maybe a little controversial. If you got somebody better at 8, put it in the comments. Make sure you subscribe, please. Helps us out. We appreciate it.
Definitely. All right.
We'll go over to Charlie's number 8.
So that's your number 8. At number 8, my number 8, I got a bad guy, I guess. I'm not going to talk too much about this guy, but when I was a kid, he had a 6-point yard per carry season, which is, insane. He was the first to 2,000 yards in a season. He had a gaudy 4.7 yard per carry lifetime average.
And the team sucked. I think I know who you're talking about.
He had 2,100. He was the first to 2,000 yards. He was 2,100. He had 2,100 receiving yards lifetime, which in a non-passing. So, of course, talking about the juice, OJ Simpson, whatever his other shit that went on or didn't go on. And, he went to jail and all this other stuff. But he was a great running back. So we're talking top 10 running backs. The eye test is there too. You just look at him from, college right through the pros. He could do it all: strength and speed and agility and moves. And he was great.
Yeah. Anybody who plays, they're playing 8 home games in Buffalo, where probably half or even more, 3/4 of those games are freezing cold, and he still put up those numbers on a shitty team. I mean, you can't discount. He's infamous for the obvious reason, but he put up those numbers before all of that turmoil and shit. So we're gauging. Ooh, little earthquake.
Frankly, man, if it wasn't for that, maybe my bias would put him a little higher.
Yeah, I hear. He'd make my list.
Like at 6 yards per carry season, man, 4.7 lifetime. I think it's like number 3 on the list.
Yeah,
in terms of lifetime, but I got him at 8.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
It is what it is.
All right, number 7. What do you got?
Number 7. I have. It pains me to do this because I'm a Giant fan, but I had to put Emmitt Smith in number 7, and I know I just did Dorsett, but to me, these two guys were just, when they hit the field, especially as a Giant fan, you were like, oh shit, to get the ball out of their hands. Emmitt Smith ripped, I don't know how many 50+ yard draw plays off the Giants at home that I've seen live and on TV, and it looks like he's not even running. Just that's a testament to their offensive line. It's a testament to play calling and all that stuff. But Emmitt Smith, you already went to some of the numbers, but 4.2 per carry, 18,000 yards, 21.5 from scrimmage, Hall of Fame, 2010, and he actually made the NFL 100 all-time team in 2019. That would be an interesting conversation to look at those players for all around.
Yeah.
But Emmitt Smith just, I don't think we need to speak too much more.
He's a great player. He's a Cowboy. We don't have to, but yeah, listen, you can't argue him. That's a good pick. All right. So
number 7, big guy.
So number 7, somebody you already mentioned, is my favorite running back of all time. A monster, a beast, passes the eye test, wrecking machine. And number 7, I have Earl Campbell.
Let's go.
I love Earl Campbell. 4.3 yards per carry, but like that at his prime, he was a 5-yard per carry guy.
Yeah.
His best season was 5.2. I'm really into this yards per carry number because if you're a 4.1 yard per carry guy versus a 5 yard, it's a big freaking difference.
Right.
And you're giving the ball to Campbell on first and second down. It's going to be third and short or first down. You're going to get less third downs, and it's going to be 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1. You're not going to stop Earl Campbell for 1 yard. It's not happening. He's getting 3 or 4 yards, and he's probably getting 5 or 6. So he was a beast. He passes the eye test. He ripped there's video. He's ripped. He would run out of his jersey.
Right.
I mean, it was insane. And like you said, they were lining up to stop him. There was no real passing game. Here's the one stat that I found on him because I was trying to justify it to myself because there was a part of me that said, man, do I leave Earl Campbell out of the top 10? Like, I think this guy's the most devastating running back I've ever seen.
Right.
His offense, during his career as an Oiler, the passing, he outran their passing game.
Wow.
He had 19,000 yards from scrimmage. The passing game, they only had 17,000 yards passing.
Right.
That's just like, that's a running back now running 250 yards per game.
Yeah, that's insane.
Average, so no one put up more running yards in his era, during those times. So Earl Campbell's my number 7.
I love it. I love that he made it twice for both of us. That's great. I'm doing research while we're speaking, which I shouldn't do, but I'm trying to find out who the quarterback was during Earl Campbell's time. We should.
He's got like a good name.
I know.
I'll get it. But so you're up for number. Are we up to top? No, we're number 6 now.
Number 6 might be a surprise.
Pastorini.
Pastorini.
And I got it before I got to Google. I didn't put it in yet.
How can you forget Pastorini?
Pastorini. He was like, he had gumption, but he wasn't,
Right.
He was like a man's Phil Simms or something.
I got for number 6, I got a guy who's the true beast mode. And I thought he was, there was like, in all of the time I've spent watching football, there's like these, the Earl Campbells and the John Riggins and the kind of the guys that are true just beasts. And then there are the guys that, like you were talking about with Faulk and LT and whatnot, guys that started to become more versatile. And I really believe that number 6, I got Marshawn Lynch, because he really was like the bridge between what was going on in the running back situation. First of all, again, another team that really wasn't, wasn't making it to the playoffs every year, but he was putting up huge numbers, another 4.2 yard per carry, 12,600 yards from scrimmage, 94 total TDs, and just over 10,000 rushing yards in 149 games. He truly was beast mode. I mean, he was just running downhill all the time. In a time when you had, when was he playing there? He was playing in Seattle, 2010 to 2015. So, there was still a lot of controversy at who the best running back was at that time. And I would argue that he was probably top 2, top 3 probably in that time period. So I got Marshawn Lynch, number 6.
That could be a little controversial, but he's no doubt he's a great running back. He's a beast. He's an animal. Yeah, I mean, he was in his prime. He was a weapon, difficult to stop. Part of those great teams.
Right.
I like it. You've got a type. You definitely have a type.
Do. That's funny. I'm glad you picked up on that. I totally do. It's just like,
that's great, man. I love it. All right, number 6 for me is this guy was, he accumulated over 18,000 total yards between, from scrimmage and receiving, 2,000 of them receiving. So he wasn't a complete, receiving weapon, solid receiving weapon. But he had a great career, but he also, for 5 years or 6 years, he was a destructive force. 3 consecutive 1,800 plus yards rushing seasons. He had the single most rushing yards in a season in football history with over 2,100 as a rookie. He had the number 3 TDs per game season, and he had the number 3 TD rushing yards per game season at 132. Talking about Eric Dickerson. Number 6. Just, again, he was a versatile weapon, but, in his prime, he was a devastating runner who also could, hurt you out of the backfield.
Right.
And had himself a nice little career. Number 6.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
I have less of a type.
Yeah.
And he's a statistic. He popped him. He was in my head right away. He was a statistic, but as I looked at his stats more and more, I'm like, he had a great career. I'm looking at careers, but he also had if you looked at, a 5-year period or a 6-year period, he's in the running for the top 5 all time, 5 years of devastation. Plus he did it over a career. So to me, that moved him up my list to number 6.
Interesting. I don't have much rhetoric on Dickerson, other than he wore the glasses.
And he said it.
Whole career with the Rams.
Yep. And he was one of the best.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll see how that holds up in the comments. See if anybody's got any other thoughts. I'm trying to see where he stacks up with Earl Campbell, because they both remind me of, big dudes with, huge shoulder pads. Oh, Earl Campbell's right behind him.
I mean, he's in the, he's total yards. He's up there all time. 4.4 yards per carry. He's up there all time.
Right.
He also could catch the ball out of the backfield, but that wasn't really his thing. He was there to run, and not really on great teams either. But he, his first 5-6 years in the league were 5 of the best. I had Grok. I talk to Grok a lot these days. I had Grok I said, who's got the best 5-year period? Because I was looking at some of these guys that had short careers, and I didn't want to just leave them out.
Mm-hmm.
So, like guys like Gale Sayers, and Dickerson was there. Dickerson was in that top 5, and then he also accumulated. So I'm not big on accumulating, but when you accumulate and you also have devastation, to me, you deserve your spot.
Yeah.
He was probably like my initial look, maybe he was 8 or 9, but I moved him up based on his numbers.
Yeah. No, I like it. And I didn't realize that he was actually even in the conversation when I was doing research. All right, top 5 for Big Tone.
Here we go.
Round out the bottom here, number 5.
This is the top 5 running backs all time.
according to the top of everything.
Exactly.
The happy hour heroes, baby. The Hofstra happy hour hero. Oh, here we go. Sporting Wares.
Yes, I love it.
This one was tough to even put on my list because I don't know. I've always had something against the Raiders. Maybe because I was just scared of them anytime the Giants would play them. But if this guy played when John Madden was coaching, who knows what he could have been in the top 3 all time. I'm talking about Marcus Allen. Put up some really he wasn't a run over you type of guy. He was like the amalgamation, if you will, of like Walter Payton and Emmitt Smith, and I would even go so far as to say like OJ, both OJs, OJ Simpson, OJ Anderson. But Marcus Allen, when he played with the Raiders, he did a stint with the Chiefs as well. I think 3 or 4 years in the early 90s or the mid 90s. But over 200 games, 12,000 yards, rushing yards. His average was 4.1 yards per carry. 123 TDs, almost 18,000 yards from scrimmage. So, that 6,000 yard delta there shows that he, again, was in that class of running backs where they were realizing that the running back position could be more versatile coming out of the backfield with slot passes and screens and whatnot. So, but the thing that I just remember about watching him the most is that it's like Roger Craig, like he just wouldn't go down, like again with Emmitt Smith, when he'd break these friggin' dive plays for 50 or 60 yards where they're supposed to maybe go 3. Marcus Allen wasn't going down, and he wasn't a big guy. He was pretty tame, certainly compared to the other ones on our list. But he became the first player in NFL history to accumulate more than 10,000 rushing yards and 5,000 receiving yards. And he got the MVP Super Bowl 18. So, a testament to a team that was always good in the 70s. And then, they started to morph into that more versatile type of franchise. It wasn't so defense or focused as John Madden was doing, but I got Marcus Allen number 5, man. What do you think?
Marcus Allen, you definitely have a type. You got that Marcus Allen, Tony Dorsett, Emmitt Smith, elusive, smaller running back that were also in the pre-passing era, could catch the ball out of the backfield. And they were elusive. They were hard to bring down. They weren't really big guys. They were quick guys. And then you've got those beasts. Like the ideal team is like you got John Riggins at fullback and you got like Tony Dorsett at half. And
right.
Try and stop that. But I love it. That's a great pick. Number 5. So my number 5 is a guy. I had this guy on my Tecmo Bowl team for like 2 years, and I was undefeated. I never lost a game for 2 years with this guy. I played as the Raiders. He was the best I've ever seen. The eye test is eye-popping. It's not just, he was insane. He was stronger than you. He was faster than you. He could also, by the way, hit the baseball a country freaking mile. You know who I'm talking about? 5.4 yards per carry average. Now, the big thing against him is shortened career. So Sayers, shortened career, I left him off. But this guy he's number 1 if he plays 10 years. And by the way, probably goes to the Hall of Fame in baseball too. Hip injuries and all this other stuff. Bo Jackson, possibly the greatest athlete of all time. He's number 5 on my top running backs of all time.
I love it, man. And I'm so, again, ladies and gentlemen, we don't compare notes. So that's what's you're getting a real reaction here. I was going through, and obviously Bo was on the top of my mind.
He's
but
a
I'm
Stanell guy.
I can't put him in there because he just doesn't have the resume. I mean, he's got the resume. He doesn't have the tenure.
Yeah. Then you look at his total stats. It's like, damn, it's not a lot. But man, when he was there, it was
he was another one just
on roids. Well, maybe might have been on roids. I don't know.
Who knows? I would argue. I don't think he was.
I don't think so either. He was just
But
just try and stop me, Albert.
I was doing research and obviously looking on YouTube, and I remember at Yankee Stadium, he was playing for the Royals, and I think he was in right field, maybe left field. Right field, and he threw this freaking missile.
Yes.
From third and got this guy out at third base, like on a line, man. And it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it.
Remember it, man. Yeah, he had a gun. He would steal bases. He could hit the ball. I mean, he was insane.
Break the batter over his leg when he struck out.
Yes.
Like, I mean, it's just you wanted him to strike out because you wanted him to freaking splinter bats,
I mean, when we get to that conversation, top greatest athletes all time, he's definitely in it. And, in pure athleticism, for sure.
Right.
Man, what a shame. Like, we didn't get to see what he would have done on both fields, and that's why it's so tough to play two sports, because it does wear your body down. Your body needs to recuperate.
Right.
But he was the best. So he's my number 5.
I like that. Really, that makes me happy that he made it on one of our lists, because
it's hard, man. It's hard to who to leave in and who leave out. Believe me, man, I thought about it, but I couldn't.
But if I'm doing a fantasy football and I'm looking at the 5 guys that I've got a choice of on my list, and Bo Jackson's not in there, I'm like, that's just a shame. He's got to be in the conversation. So I'm glad he's on the list.
Right, to number 4.
Number 4. So this guy, we already talked about him. These aren't going to be real mysteries. But there might be some controversy here on why number 4, and this is like the Hendricks conversation, right? Like, is he number 1, and why why have him at number 4? Why he should be the top 1, 2, 3? But it's only because I think the team around him was so good. Not early on, but in the 80s, like we talked about before, I think they were going to beat anybody no matter what. But I'm talking about sweetness. Walter Payton, number 4. Crazy stats. 12 years in the league, all with the Bears. 190 games, 16,700 rushing yards, 4.4 yards per carry, 21, almost 22,000 all-purpose yards, Hall of Fame 96, and then he also made the NFL Top 100 team in 2019. What they named, he was coined sweetness for a reason, and the high stepping and all that stuff. But he was another guy. I think when I think of Bo Jackson, I think of Walter Payton. When I think of Walter Payton, I think of Bo Jackson. They both had that, their feet didn't seem to touch the ground when they were at full speed running down the sidelines. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, they were just gone. Deion Sanders too. When he got up to speed, like, there was no catching him, man. I mean, these guys were just, Earl Campbell wasn't that. Tony Dorsett wasn't that. But like, watching Walter Payton make people miss, and I'm sure we're going to get to one guy who will have the same type of conversation about, was really impressive. And this was, the tail end of the Steelers Dallas rivalry or early in his career, was, right in the heart of it. But when you're talking about guys like Tony Dorsett, wide receivers like Drew Pearson, guys that are fleet on their feet, Walter Payton's right in that conversation. And as the Bears started to figure themselves out, he was putting up numbers that no one else was. And then the 80s came, and he was just basking in all that glory. I don't even know what
it was better than I remembered. Like, I knew he was a great running back, and a lot of the live stuff I saw of him was at the tail end of his career, not live in person, but just watching the Bears games. I wasn't watching a lot of Bears games. But when I went back and looked, because, one of the things that we do for this is we do some homework, we do some studying. And I looked at film on all these guys, and I'm big on looking at football film. Like, I scout the draft for the Jets every year because that's our Super Bowl. And, I watch videotape of college, and I'm a huge college football fan in Missouri. Shout out to Missouri. And I love looking at tape. And when I pulled out the tape of him, I was like, I knew he was going to be in my top 10, and it was hard putting him at 10. He probably deserves to be way higher, but man, he was so much better. Like, especially you go back into early on in his career, he was, like you said, BoJack, speed and power.
Right.
He had those two. He would float down that sideline. But by the way, if you want to try and tackle me, I'll run you over, brother. Like,
right.
So what do you do with a guy like that? And yeah, it's a great pick. And he also had a shite ton of yards out of the backfield in an era when they didn't throw to the receivers. He's up at 10, so
it's huge, right? Like, I can't even think about when he would have caught a ball. That wasn't part of the game plan.
I think he got like 1 or 2 balls a game, but he probably went for 50 yards. So that's why he's got like 2,000 yards. I have it here somewhere. He has a lot of yards. They didn't throw him the ball a lot. They threw the ball to him as much as Marshall Faulk. He probably had 10,000 yards out of the backfield.
Right.
You know what I mean? He had 4,500 receiving yards.
That's crazy.
Out of the backfield. That's insane, dude. Like, they didn't throw the ball. He's up there at the top. So that's a great pick, man.
Yeah. All
right. All right. That takes me to my number 4. My number four, kind of like, I had Eric Dickerson in my thought right away. I had, the guy who's at my number 3 in my head right away. This guy I didn't have I was thinking he wouldn't be in the top 10. I thought he would be maybe around 8, 9, 10. I didn't maybe see him as much. Like, I went and looked at video. The video is eye-popping. And of course, I've seen him. I've had him on rotisserie teams. I mean, I know how great of a running back he is, but I'm like, does he belong there with Earl Campbell and Bo Jackson and
I'm dying here.
And Emmitt Smith and all these guys? He had a 4.6 yard per carry average. And the last 2 or 3 years of his career, he was running for shit. So, it got dragged down a little bit. So only Bo Jackson and my top 2 had a better career yard per carry average. Saquon Barkley has higher, but he's not done yet. 15,000 rushing yards, 2,500 receiving yards, which puts him in the top 10. 126 touchdowns. He had the second best season in history with 131 yard average. Here's a thing that pushed him up my list that I didn't realize when I was thinking about this guy, because I knew he was great, but he didn't really play with any great QBs. He didn't play with any really great receivers. His offensive lines were good at times, but not always. He was like Campbell in the sense that he dominated, and he was the team. The guy is
your NFC.
Adrian Peterson.
Oh, AP.
I got him at number 4, and I'm going to be honest, man. I wanted to leave him off my top 10. I'm like, Peterson's probably 10. Like, I'm going to put in Emmitt at 10, or I'm going to put in, Saquon at 10 or 9 to leave Adrian up. But then I looked at the numbers. I'm like, I'm a big yard per carry guy. The guy averaged 4.6 for his career. He had some of the best single seasons ever, and he did it by himself.
Guess who my number 3 is?
I before you do tell me that, I literally said, oh, he must have been on that team with Moss and all these, like there were other weapons. That's why he. And I looked and I was like, no, there was nobody.
No.
So before Adrian Peterson, is that your number 3?
That's my number 3. Unbelievable.
Love it.
I mean, for all the reasons you stated and all the stats, I'm not going to repeat it, but like another one where you're just like, forget the internet. Just like I'm going by memory and like the oh shit factor. Like when he had the ball, it was like, oh, here we go. Of course, I'm always looking at it from
you're the NFC guys.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so I was looking at the videos of Peterson and going, holy, like the video's there. The eye test is there. I just didn't see as much of him. I watch a lot of football, but I'm tending to watch AFC. So You're a Giant fan. You've been burnt. You've tasted that bitterness.
Yeah. We're just running over our defensive backfield. But to your point, man, 4.6, almost 17,500 all-purpose yards. Like, ridiculous, right? Again, and he had a pretty long career with Minnesota, and then he went to like 3, 4, 5 other teams where he tried to get the glory back. But I'm not like, as we're going through this, I'm actually starting to think that we could have a conversation about types of running backs, and we could actually have different episodes about types of running backs, and then we can have episodes about like the styles of each of those running backs in those times, right? Like Adrian Peterson, I guess, what was it? He played what? 07, let me see, 07 to 16 in Minnesota. Again, you like you said, like they didn't have the greatest team. Like that's what's a testament to some of these running backs. Like, you like Walter Payton, like perennial, 500 teams that don't make the playoffs, and
those Bears teams were pretty bad.
Right. So, the only thing that would have made Peterson even better is if they were playing outside, like, having the OJ factor, or,
That's a good point.
The other guys.
That's the beauty of debate and all this stuff. It's like, and error to error, like, and you have to take all that into consideration. That's why it's so difficult, right? You're looking at their career, you're looking at devastation over a short period, devastation over a long period, accumulation versus, being an unstoppable force. The eye test, a guy like Bo Jackson, who was completely unstoppable, versus a guy like Emmitt Smith, who had a great offensive line in front of him, but also would devastate you. And if he got, the guy's top 12 all time,
right,
or top 5 maybe to some people. And if you're a Cowboy fan, he's probably number 3 all time or number 2 all time.
Right.
But that's the beauty of these discussions, that there's so many different factors to look at. You look at like the hockey players in the 70s, they were smoking butts on the bench.
Right.
And they drank beers in the off season. These guys now are like, McDavid is like a machine. The guy is ripped to shreds. He doesn't, smoking, forget it. So I love this stuff. I love it. That's why, that's why we're here.
It's no mistake that we always have overlap. But yeah, AP's my number 3. So
number 3 for me. And, I'm actually surprised we didn't have more overlap, and I'm kind of glad, because
we might hear, but we'll see.
We were going to be like, who's, let's just do the top 10 together. Let's have an agreement. But then I started making my list. I'm like, wait a minute, Bo Jackson, Emmitt Smith. I'm leaving Emmitt Smith out. He's going to have Emmitt Smith. So I'm like, all right. So, number 3, the yards per carry. He's only got quote unquote 4.3 yards per carry average. Still, historically high, but that's the lowest on my list. Equal to a couple other guys. I forget who the other guy is. Emmitt Smith was 4.2. Campbell and Faulk were also at 4.3. So it's no slouch, but everybody else is higher. But he had a 5.2 yard per carry season, which is devastating. He had a 31 touchdown season. that alone, I'm like, I'm gonna maybe put you in my top 10 just on that season. That's way more than Bo Jackson ever had, way more than Emmitt Smith ever had, way more than anybody ever had. It's the number one, 31 TDs, 18,000 total yards. He had 4,700 receiving yards, which I think is number 2 all time. So he was a dual threat. How are you going to stop me? Unbelievable on the eye. Maybe he's not the eye that Bo Jackson is, or that some of my number 2 and number 1 guy are, but still, the guy ran for 5.2 yard average and also was a threat. The guy is LaDainian Tomlinson at number 3.
LT. All right. He made it. I'm glad.
He's a better runner than Faulk, in my opinion, but he also brought that passing, almost 5,000 yards passing, out of the backfield. He is maybe like the perfect running back for now. Like I'm taking other guys over him, but he gave you both at a very, very high level, and that pushed him up my list. Plus 31 TDs in a season.
Yeah.
How
that was
impossible. Yeah.
He had 5 in one game. I had him that year.
I don't think the Jets had 31 touchdowns that season. Like, seriously.
Right.
Many seasons. So,
right.
Number 3, LaDainian.
Wow. I really love that. I'm glad he made it because he didn't make mine. But I talked about him before. Again, he's one of those backs. So he's not, if we're talking about those silos, right? He's not a Bo. He's not a Walter Payton. He's not a Emmitt Smith. He's kind of that Faulk, Marshawn Lynch type. Well, Lynch was a little bit more, head on, but like LT was such a threat out of the backfield. Out of those 31 touchdowns, I wonder how many were receiving. I don't know if you can find.
It was a pretty good number, and he also had like a lot of short runs too. But he had a season where he averaged 5.2, and his career 4.3 is low. He also was one of those guys like Peterson. At the end, he had a couple. He was his stat, dragged that average down a little bit in the end. But he's a he's a force. He's a weapon. Is he the devastating runner that Walter Payton and Bo Jackson were? No, but he could be devastating. He was a great runner, and he was also a great receiver.
Right.
And because of that, he makes it all the way up to number 3 for me.
That's great. And where did he go? He went to the Redskins after?
He bounced around a little bit. Yeah.
Or the Jets? Didn't the Jets get him?
Yeah, he was okay. He was okay. Yeah. He was still, he was a threat. He could do things still, but he wasn't the player that he was, with that team. And they had some weapons on that team too. It was kind of the perfect fit, but he was a great running back. And he was another one of these guys. He was a great running back in college, great running back in the pros. And statistically too, which I do weigh statistics, he's up there with the best.
Yeah.
Total yards, and in terms of a 5-year devastation, he's in there. He's in the conversation.
Right. Awesome. I love it. And you know what? Another one who was just like on a team that was they'd make the playoffs, or they'd mostly have a sub 500 seasons. I can't even think of who the wide receivers were while he was playing.
It was like a revolving door of people.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm thinking our top 2 are the same, but unless you got a major curveball for me.
I don't know. I mean, this might be a little controversial, but this is one guy, and I'll start by saying this is my number 2. I've never seen him play, not even on TV. And I think one of my recurring themes, like I just alluded to, is I am a big fan of the bruisers, and I'm a big fan of the guys who put it all out there, even if they're on a shitty team. Brandon Jacobs comes to mind as a Giant fan. Like he could have been a top 10 running back, but he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, you could almost argue the same thing for Saquon. If he would stay with the Giants and the Giants stay where they are for the next 5 years during his career and not make the playoffs, who knows if he'd be, what type of season, what type of career he'd have. But I mean, this team has been, that's the reason they call them the dog pound and the mistake by the lake and all that stuff, right? But with the Cleveland Browns, I'm talking about Jim Brown, number 2.
At number 2 all time.
All time.
I too have Jim Brown at number 2 all time.
Oh my God. That's good. So this is funny, man. It'll be interesting to see who we got number 1.
We got the same guy. I mean, but Jim Brown, right, became he had a movie career. He was the best. It was the 50s and 60s. They ran the ball like you. I've never seen him. I've only seen highlight reels.
Right.
But you look at those reels of what you can see, it's insane. He's a man amongst boys.
Right. And I mean, here some factors that really made this, we'll talk about it at the end because I don't want to name drop and leave any hints, but you talk about mediocre teams, you talk about the type of field that these guys had to play on. You can't even tell, who's on what team because they're all 22 players are all covered in mud all the time. You don't know, right? But, so you take that into account. And then the fact that this guy had a 5.2 yard per carry average. The highest, right? 15,400 all-purpose yards and 126 TDs. Obviously Hall of Fame, class of 71. So he made it 5 years after he retired. But, when you're putting up teams in that era were built to stop the run. There was no passing game, right? So that's what you did. And when you prepare to play against the Cleveland Browns, who another team that plays in cold weather, mud, all that stuff, and you've got one guy that you need to stop and you can't, how do you not have him in the top, in your top 1, 2, 3 of a list? So Jim Brown, I wish I would have seen him. Funny as hell, and I'm gonna get you, sucker, with the bunions.
Yeah. He's one of these things when you're looking from era to era that I see people do that kind of annoys me, honestly. Like, you say like, oh, if Babe Ruth or whoever, if you took him and put him now, he would suck, or what, maybe baseball's not the right sport, but if you took some basketball player from the 50s and put them now, like athletically, they wouldn't compete. But I don't like to compare eras athletically, but if you look at Jim Brown and you took him and put him now, I have no doubt he would not only, I think when he was in his 50s, he could have played in the NFL and he competed. Like that's what a beast he is. He does transfer from era to era. He was great. I said the highest ever. Technically, Bo Jackson had a higher 5.4, but it was only over 5 seasons. So you would think that would come down if Bo Jackson had a 15-year career or 10-plus year career. Maybe not. Might have went up. But yeah, Jim Brown at number 2, it's almost blasphemy, but I think it's because the guy that at number 1, we both seen him and we know how insane he is at number 1 of all time.
1, 2, 3. Barry Sanders.
Yes. If we had something different, that would have been horrible.
I know.
Highlight reel.
I know. Oh my God. Just again. I mean, I couldn't wait to watch him on Thanksgiving Day. You knew Detroit was going to lose, and you knew they were going to lose by 30 points, but he'd still throw up, a couple of TDs, 100 plus yards, and like leave people's jock straps on the field. Like the human highlight reel is just absolutely accurate. Go ahead and go through some of his stats.
Yeah, well, 5 yards per carry average, 15,000 yards rushing in 10 seasons. So he averaged 1,500 yards a season, which is a really high number.
Yeah,
3,000 receiving yards out of the backfield. The biggest thing for me is the eye test. He, like you said, jock strap lever. There was him and Earl Campbell and Bo Jackson maybe too, but him and Earl Campbell was the most like, oh my God, like destroy people's mental state. Barry Sanders, same thing, except in a different way. Like, you can't catch me, and also strong as shit though. Like, if you try to tackle him, he would run out of tackles, but
Right.
he had it all: elusiveness, speed. He could run sideways just as fast as he can run forward and backwards. Right? Like it didn't make sense. He was like a video game.
He really was, and low to the ground. Again, another era when passing out of the backfield wasn't really a thing. Teams were ready for that type of stuff, but it was, and again, I can't get past it. Like, Detroit always sucked. They were. It's so nice to see them where they are now, and making runs and people. I actually picked them to be in the Super Bowl this year. When you do an early bet in March, I should say last year, not this year. So like just watching him, and he's got that kind of Adrian Peterson, Marshawn Lynch feel to me, where it's like I'll watch this game if it's a nothing game and the Giants are involved, because I want to see these guys, whether they're on my fantasy team or not. Like, I want to watch this guy. That's like, when Secretariat would run a race, like, I'm watching the race, even though I don't have any money. I don't have any stake in it. But, Barry Sanders is there's no coincidence in the fact that you and I have some overlaps here in the top 5.
Yeah. I mean, he was the best. I think there's no doubt about it. And, I test statistically, that yards per carry, like I said, that I lean into, it's right up there. Class act too, right? Gentle guy.
Right.
And like you said, and this is one of the things that I looked at with each of these guys, the defense, when you were playing the Lions, your game plan was, your game plan was never to stop Barry Sanders, because you couldn't stop him. But your game plan was to contain him. If you can contain him, if you could hold him to 150 yards, combined off, running and passing, like you're going to probably beat the Lions. Like, if you're going to beat us in the air. But we're going to we're going to spy him, and we're going to set up our box to stop Sanders
right
from breaking away on us and ripping off 80-yard runs.
Right.
He could go for 250 on you, or 200 on you, like that. He could rip off 70-yard runs. So his whole career, he's, being pursued by 11 guys relentlessly, just focused on him, not focused on the QB, not focused on the receiver. They had some good passing teams in there too, and especially because they were bad, so they'd be down, so they would have to air it out. So, they would even shy away from it. So if you put him on a good team, like, who knows what he could have done. Yeah. I don't
know if Calvin Johnson played with Barry, maybe towards the end of his career.
I think they had some overlap, right? I'm not positive, but
they just had nobody who could throw to him.
But even then, I still think you're kind of, okay, let's double Calvin, but stack the box on Sanders. No one ever, you were always thinking about Sanders when you came to play them, and he still was going to destroy you. Maybe you shouldn't have thought about it. Maybe that was the thing to do. Just let it do what he's going to do. But
it's like the same with Jim Brown. I mean, we're 11 guys. We're focusing on this guy, but he's still going to average 5 yards a carry. Like, I don't think there's any controversy with who we have in the top 2. People might throw Gale Sayers in there or
Gale Sayers was a tough one to leave out. But like, my excuse was, well, I'm putting in, Gale Sayers' 5-year career too. Like, but no doubt in a 5-year period, he was as good as you've ever seen. Can't have everybody, but that's what these things, that's the beauty of these. That is our top 10 running backs of all time. Let us know what you think in the comments. Buy us a drink or a coffee if you like. Please subscribe.
Legit.
That's the biggest thing. And Love the helmet.
I'm surprised you didn't have Curtis Martin in there, man.
Great running back. Not in my top 10.
Yeah.
And he was a Patriot for a lot of his career too. So, that hurts.
That hurts him.
He did as much devastation against me as joy that he gave me. So,
That's true.
yeah.
And then we'll do the greatest wide receiver of all time, Wayne Corbett.
We'll have to, yes, greatest out of Hofstra. Probably. I don't know.
No. Marcus Colston.
Oh, that's right. Colston. I was going to make or it might have been Skinnell. Well, you were our quarterback for the
Yeah, that's right.
Who was our best receiver? It wasn't me. Who had the hands? Klechka? I don't know.
Probably Kletchko or Ozzy.
Yeah, throw the Klechka and Ozzy. Those Long Beach guys. No, not Long Beach. Where they were Bayshore guys.
Right, Bayshore.
Good athletes, man. Just throw them the ball.
All right, that's it. Our top 10.
All right, brother. Well, it was good chat with you. We got St. Pat's on deck here. I'm going to go enjoy myself some Guinness and
enjoy.
And it was good chat with you all again, and we shall see you soon.
Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe.
Yes, sir.
Peace out.
All right, guys. Cheers.
You're an animal.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.